Do US app developers need GST HST registration? If you develop apps in the United States and sell to Canadian users, sooner or later you run into the question of Canadian sales tax. Many app developers assume that because everything happens online and the company is based in the US, Canadian GST HST does not apply. That assumption can be wrong, especially after Canada's digital economy rules came into force. Whether you need GST, HST registration depends on what you are selling, who you are selling to, how much revenue you generate from Canadian customers, and whether you sell through platforms or directly. Apps are usually taxable digital supplies. From a Canadian tax perspective, most paid apps, in-app subscriptions, SaaS tools, and other digital products are taxable supplies. Users are receiving digital content, software, or online services, and these do not fall into the usual exempt categories like healthcare or financial services. That means, in principle, GST HST should apply when the customer is a Canadian resident, even if the supplier is outside Canada. The key question then becomes who is required to register and charge the tax, you, the platform, or both? Digital economy rules for non-resident vendors. Canada introduced specific digital economy measures that target non-resident vendors of digital products and services to Canadian consumers. In simple terms, if you are a non-resident and you supply taxable digital products or services to Canadian individuals who are not registered for GST HST and your sales to Canadian customers exceed a prescribed threshold, you may be required to register and collect GST HST under a simplified regime. The threshold is generally 30,000 Canadian dollars of taxable supplies over a rolling 12-month period, looking at worldwide taxable supplies that are connected to Canada. Once you cross that line, treating Canada as just another market without tax can become very risky. Selling through app stores versus direct sales. If you sell your app exclusively through a major app store or digital platform, the platform may itself be treated as the supplier for GST HST purposes under Canada's rules. In that scenario, the platform handles registration, tax collection, and remittance on sales to Canadian consumers, and it simply remits your share of the net proceeds. However, this platform treatment is not universal and does not automatically cover every type of transaction. If you also sell subscriptions directly through your own website or you provide additional in-app services built outside the platform, those direct supplies may create a separate registration obligation for your US company once Canadian revenue grows. Business customers versus consumers. The digital economy rules focus heavily on supplies to end consumers. If your US app business mainly serves Canadian corporations and other registered businesses, the analysis changes. In that case, it may be more appropriate to use a regular GST HST registration rather than the simplified regime, and your Canadian customers may self-assess tax under reverse charge rules in some situations. In practice, many B2B app developers still choose to register once they have a meaningful Canadian presence or revenue base. Registration allows them to charge GST HST where required, show Canadian tax on invoices, and claim input tax credits on any Canadian expenses or imports. Measuring the threshold for registration. The small supplier rule uses a $30,000 threshold based on worldwide taxable supplies that are connected to Canada over either a single calendar quarter or a rolling period of 4 consecutive quarters. Zero-rated supplies count towards this threshold while exempt supplies do not. For a typical app developer, most sales will be fully taxable, so it does not take many subscriptions at scale to exceed the threshold. Once you cross the threshold, registration stops being optional. You are expected to register and start charging GST HST on the supply that pushed you over the line or shortly thereafter, depending on how you exceeded the threshold. Registration options for app developers. Non-resident digital businesses have 2 basic registration paths. A simplified GST HST registration is available for certain digital products and services supplied to Canadian consumers. It allows you to collect and remit tax without claiming input tax credits and is designed to be easier to manage from abroad. A regular registration is available when you have a broader Canadian presence, make supplies of goods, or want to claim input tax credits on Canadian expenses. Choosing between these options depends on your business model. If your main connection to Canada is streaming or app subscriptions to individuals, the simplified system may be enough. If you have staff, contractors, or warehousing in Canada, or if you incur significant Canadian expenses, a full registration is often more appropriate. A practical example. Imagine a US SaaS company that offers a project management app on a subscription basis. It sells through its own website and has no physical presence in Canada. Over 12 months, it grows to 50,000 Canadian dollars in subscription revenue from Canadian customers, most of whom are individuals or small unregistered businesses. At that point, the company has clearly crossed the threshold that Canada uses to determine when non-resident digital vendors must register. It should register, start charging GST, HST on subscriptions to Canadian customers, and remit the tax regularly. If it ignores the requirement, CRA can later assess the tax plus interest and penalties based on those historic sales. Final thoughts. US app developers are no longer invisible to Canadian tax just because they operate online. If you have paying Canadian users and your revenue crosses the threshold, you can be pulled into the GST HST system even without a single employee or server in Canada. The basic rule of thumb is simple. If you are selling taxable digital products or services to Canadian consumers at any kind of scale, you should assume that GST HST registration is either already required or will be soon. It is far better to set up a compliant structure early than to wait for CRA to connect the dots for you. If you want more targeted guidance on how these rules apply to your specific app or platform, you can explore our website for detailed resources on digital economy GST HST compliance. If you require assistance with Canadian tax matters, our team is ready to provide reliable professional support. Please contact us at 416-283-8774 or visit theaccountingandtax.com for more information. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.